I was driving alone through the San Juan Mountains when the man sitting in my passenger seat suddenly vanished into thin air. 1 second he was there, dripping wet and whispering about the others who didn't stop. The next second, nothing. Just an empty seat and the smell of decay lingering in the air. The temperature inside my car dropped so fast that ice crystals formed on my windshield from the inside. Welcome back to the Haunted Fears horror family. Tonight, we're taking you through 11 terrifying encounters on haunted mountain highways that will make your blood run cold. Would you dare to drive these roads alone at night? I was driving alone through the San Juan Mountains when the man sitting in my passenger seat suddenly vanished into thin air, leaving nothing but the smell of decay and ice crystals forming on my windshield from the inside. Welcome back to the Haunted Fears horror family. My name is Jackson, and I've been a long-haul trucker for the past 5 years, running routes through some of the most isolated stretches of highway in Colorado. Route 666 through the San Juan Mountains was my regular run, the kind of road that most drivers avoided after dark, but I needed the money, and the overtime pay was too good to pass up. I knew every curve, every pothole, every faded warning sign that told you to watch for falling rocks. I'd driven it in blizzards, through torrential rain, and in fog so thick it felt like driving through cotton. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened on that October night. It was just past midnight when I started my ascent into the mountains. The dispatcher had warned me about fog in the higher elevations, but I'd driven through worse. My rig was loaded with building supplies headed for a construction site in Durango, and I was already running 2 hours behind schedule because of a delay at the depot. The last thing I needed was to pull over and wait for conditions to improve, so I pushed forward, my high beams cutting through the darkness, the yellow dividing line my only guide through the serpentine curves that snaked up the mountain. The temperature outside was dropping fast, my dashboard thermometer showing 38 degrees and falling. I cranked up the heat and turned on the radio, looking for something to keep me company, but all I got was static. Cell service had died about 20 miles back, which was normal for this stretch. I was completely alone up here, just me and the mountain and the endless darkness pressing against my windows. That's when the fog rolled in. Not gradually, the way fog usually builds, but all at once, like someone had thrown a blanket over my windshield. My visibility dropped to maybe 15 feet, forcing me to slow down to a crawl. The road seemed to narrow, the trees on either side leaning in closer, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for my truck. I'd been driving for 3 hours straight, and my eyes were starting to play tricks on me. Shadows moved at the edge of my peripheral vision, shapes that looked almost human before dissolving back into the fog. I was rounding a particularly tight curve when my headlights caught something on the shoulder of the road. A figure. A man standing completely still, his arm extended with his thumb out in the universal gesture of a hitchhiker. My first instinct was to keep going. Nobody with good intentions is hitchhiking on a mountain highway at midnight in the middle of October. But something made me look in my rearview mirror, and what I saw made my foot hit the brake pedal. He was still standing there, but he hadn't moved, not even turned his head to watch my truck pass. He was just frozen in place like a statue. Against every bit of common sense I had, I put the truck in reverse and backed up until I was alongside him. I rolled down my passenger window, and that's when the cold hit me. Not the normal cold of an October night in the mountains, but a bone-deep freeze that made my teeth chatter instantly. The man stepped closer to the window, and I got my first good look at him. He was maybe in his 30s, with dark hair plastered to his head like he'd just climbed out of a swimming pool. His clothes were completely soaked, water dripping from his jacket onto the road, forming a puddle at his feet. "Need a ride?" I asked, already regretting stopping. He didn't answer, just opened the passenger door and climbed in. The smell hit me immediately. Rain and earth and something else. Something rotten that made my stomach turn. He settled into the seat, and I noticed the water pooling beneath him, soaking into my floor mat. His clothes looked strange, outdated somehow, The jacket was a style I hadn't seen in years, maybe decades, with wide lapels and buttons that looked hand-stitched. "Where you headed?" I asked, putting the truck back in gear and starting to roll forward. He turned to look at me, and that's when I saw his eyes. They reflected the light from my dashboard like an animal's eyes, that unnatural green glow that predators have. "Just up the road," he said, his voice hollow and distant, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. We drove in silence for maybe 5 minutes, the only sound the rumble of my diesel engine and the occasional drip of water from his clothes. The temperature inside the cab kept dropping despite the heater running full blast. I could see my breath now, thick clouds of condensation forming with each exhale. Something was very wrong here. Been waiting long. I tried to make conversation, tried to pretend this was normal. "Long enough," he said. Then he started talking about the others, the ones who didn't stop, the ones who saw him standing there and kept driving, their taillights disappearing into the fog. He said their names, one after another, a litany of strangers I'd never met. But the way he said them, with such intimate knowledge, such possession, made my skin crawl. "How do you know all those people?" I asked, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter. "I know everyone who drives this road," he said. "I've been here a very long time, waiting, watching. The ones who stop, the ones who don't. I remember them all." I glanced over at him, and that's when I noticed something that made my blood turn to ice. His clothes weren't just old-fashioned. They were decaying. The fabric was rotting, falling apart at the seams, and underneath I could see pale skin that looked wrong, too gray, too mottled. "Look, man, I think I need to pull over," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm not feeling well." He smiled then, and I'll never forget that smile. His teeth were too white, too perfect, set in gums that were black and receding. "You don't need to pull over, Jackson," he whispered. I never told him my name. I'd never introduced myself. The terror that shot through me was electric, primal. "How do you know my name?" "I know everything about you," he said. "I know you're behind schedule. I know you're thinking about your daughter's birthday next week. I know you're afraid of dying alone on this mountain." He leaned closer, and the smell of decay intensified. "I know you're going to join the others soon." "Get out," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Get out of my truck right now." He laughed, a sound like wind through a cemetery. "You invited me in, Jackson. You stopped. You opened the door. Now I'm part of your journey." I looked away from him for just a second, focusing on the road ahead, trying to find a place to pull over, trying to figure out how to get this thing out of my truck. And when I looked back, he was gone, just vanished. The passenger seat was completely dry, no water, no wet floor mat, no sign that anyone had ever been sitting there. But the smell lingered, that awful combination of rain and rot that made me gag. I pulled over at the next turnout, my entire body shaking. I jumped out of the truck and checked the passenger side. Nothing. No footprints, no water on the ground, nothing. I grabbed my phone, forgetting I had no signal. And that's when I saw the notifications. Dozens of missed calls, all from numbers I didn't recognize. Voicemails filling up my inbox. With trembling hands, I played the first one. It was my voice. My exact voice. "Jackson, don't stop for him. Don't stop for the man on Route 666. Keep driving. Whatever you do, keep driving." The next message was the same. And the next. All of them were me, warning myself about the hitchhiker. Calls that came in before I'd even started my route that night. Calls from a future that was trying to warn the past. I got back in my truck and drove the rest of the route without stopping, checking my passenger seat every few seconds to make sure it was still empty. When I finally reached Durango as the sun was coming up, I went straight to the local library and started researching Route 66. What I found made me quit my job that same day. In 1952, a man died on that exact stretch of road. He'd been hitchhiking during a rainstorm, and when a car finally stopped for him, he'd gotten into the vehicle. They found the car 3 days later, wrapped around a tree. The driver was dead, but the hitchhiker's body was never found. And every year since then, drivers have reported picking up a soaked man who vanishes from their passenger seat, leaving only the smell of death behind. I never drove Route 666 again, but sometimes late at night, I still smell that decay, and I wonder if he's still waiting for me to come back. The walls of the tunnel were pulsing like living tissue, and I realized with absolute horror that I wasn't driving through a mountain. I was inside something's throat. Welcome back to the Haunted Fears horror family. They found my rig 3 days later, parked at the Johnstown Tunnel exit with the engine still running and the driver's seat empty. The cargo was untouched. The doors were locked from the inside. Security footage showed me entering the tunnel, but never coming out the other side, even though my truck did. The police filed it as a missing person case. They're still looking. They won't find anything. But before I disappeared, I managed to upload this recording to my cloud drive. This is what really happened in the Allegheny Mountains that night. March 23rd. Temperature outside was 41 degrees. I remember because I'd just checked my weather app, planning my route from Pittsburgh to Charleston. The podcast I was listening to had just reached the part where the detective finds the buried evidence. I remembered these details because they were the last normal moments of my existence. The Johnstown Tunnel appeared in my headlights at 11:04 p.m. I know the exact time because I glanced at my dashboard clock, thinking I'd arrive early enough to grab breakfast at that diner in Charleston, the one that makes blueberry pancakes. Stupid thoughts. Mundane thoughts. The kind of thoughts you have when you don't know your life is about to end. The pressure hit my eardrums the moment I crossed the threshold. Not gradual. Instant. Unlike someone had shoved knitting needles through both ears simultaneously. I gasped, one hand flying to the side of my head while the other gripped the wheel. The podcast audio distorted, slowing down until the detective's voice became a deep, inhuman growl before cutting out entirely. That's when I saw the walls. The tiles were weeping, not water. Something thicker. The substance oozed from cracks I'd never noticed before, spreading across the curved surfaces in branching patterns that looked exactly like blood vessels, capillaries, veins, arteries pumping something dark and viscous. I've always been analytical. It's kept me sane through worse situations than most people face. Blown tire at 70 miles per hour, calculate the safest trajectory. Black ice on a bridge, physics and weight distribution. I didn't panic. I observed. The substance wasn't dripping down the way water should. It was moving upward in some places, sideways in others, following invisible pathways that defied gravity. The sound started low, subsonic. I felt it in my molars first, that deep vibration that resonates in bone before reaching conscious hearing. Then it grew louder, rhythmic, a massive inhalation that seemed to pull air from inside my truck, making my ears pop again. Then exhalation, a wind that shouldn't exist in an enclosed tunnel, carrying a smell that made my analytical mind finally stumble. Decay, stomach acid, digestion. My dashboard went dark. Not flickering, just dead. But I could still see because the walls themselves were glowing now, bioluminescent patches spreading like mold, pulsing in time with that breathing. My truck began losing speed despite my foot steady on the accelerator. The engine was running. I could hear it. But we were slowing down as if something was actively holding us back. When we stopped, we were suspended. I don't mean parked. I mean suspended. I looked down and saw nothing beneath my tires. The floor of the tunnel had opened up, and my entire 18-wheeler was being held in place by strands of something that looked like muscle tissue, wrapped around the axles and frame. We were caught in a web made of meat. I didn't scream. Screaming is what prey does, and I'd already figured out what I was. The breathing accelerated, that excited rhythm predators get when they know they've caught something. I grabbed my phone and started recording this message because I'm analytical even when I'm about to die. and someone needs to know. The walls began contracting in waves, peristaltic motion moving from the entrance behind me toward the exit ahead. I was watching digestion happen in real time. The strands holding my truck started pulling it apart. Not violently, methodically, the way you'd unwrap a piece of candy. Metal shrieked as the trailer separated from the cab. Cargo spilled out into the void below, machinery worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, tumbling into what I could now see was a massive organic cavity filled with partially dissolved vehicles, dozens of them. Some looked decades old. I climbed into the sleeper berth and opened the emergency roof hatch. The air that poured in was hot and humid and smelled like a slaughterhouse. Above me, the ceiling of the tunnel was lined with what looked like cilia, those hair-like projections that line your intestines, all waving in coordinated patterns. I could see the exit now, maybe 500 feet away. 500 feet of living tunnel that was actively trying to digest me. I jumped, landed on one of those muscle strands. It was warm and slick, and it contracted under my weight, but it held. I ran. Not along the road surface. That was gone, dissolved into the organic mass below, but along these strands, leaping from one to another like some nightmare obstacle course. The breathing grew frantic, angry. The walls contracted faster, and I felt heat building, saw steam rising from below where digestive enzymes were pooling. A strand snapped under my foot, and I fell, catching myself on another one, my fingers sinking into tissue that felt disturbingly like raw chicken. Something burned my hand, acid, and I screamed then, not from fear, but from pain, pure chemical burn eating through my palm. I yanked my hand free, leaving skin behind, and kept moving because stopping meant dissolving. The exit was right there, 50 feet away, but the tunnel was closing. The opening was literally sphinctering shut, muscle tissue contracting in a spiral pattern. I could see normal night sky beyond it, stars, freedom, reality. I pushed every muscle in my body beyond its limit, sprinting along those strands, feeling them snap and fall away behind me like burning bridges. I dove through the gap just as it sealed shut, felt the tissue brush against my boots, felt the heat of digestive acids. And then I was rolling on normal asphalt, normal air, normal world, while behind me the tunnel entrance looked perfectly ordinary. Concrete, tiles, LED lights. My truck emerged 30 seconds later, rolling on its own momentum, completely intact. The trailer full of cargo, the doors locked, engine running, as if nothing had happened. But my hand was burned. My clothes were dissolved in patches, and when I looked at the security camera footage later, it showed my truck driving through normally, while I simply vanished. I'm uploading this from a motel in Maryland. The police have called twice. I haven't answered. How do I explain that the Johnstown Tunnel is a living organism, that it's been feeding on vehicles and drivers since 1953, that it occasionally lets the vehicles through to avoid suspicion? How do I explain that I escaped something that shouldn't exist? I won't. I'm disappearing, changing my name. The Haunted Fears horror family will probably never see this, but if they do, listen carefully. The Johnstown Tunnel in West Virginia. Never drive through it. Take the long way around. Add an extra hour to your trip. I don't care if you're late, because that tunnel doesn't take everyone. It's selective, it's patient, and it's still hungry. This is Valentina signing off, or whoever I was before tonight. That person doesn't exist anymore. We've passed the same twisted tree 17 times, but the odometer says we've driven 400 miles, and my daughter hasn't aged a single day in what might be 20 years. Welcome back to the Haunted Fears horror family. The tree was impossible to miss. A Douglas fir struck by lightning sometime in the distant past. Its trunk spiraled into a corkscrew shape that defied nature. Emma pointed at it from the back seat, her 7-year-old voice cutting through the Taylor Swift song playing on the stereo. "Daddy, look at the funny tree." "That's cool, sweetheart," I said, barely glancing at it. We'd been driving for 6 hours from Seattle toward the Cascade Range, heading to my brother's cabin for Emma's spring break. My wife Sarah was dozing in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window. The morning sun was warm through the windshield. Everything was perfect. Everything was normal. 10 minutes later, Emma spoke again. "Daddy, there's that funny tree." I looked. The same corkscrew Douglas fir, identical angle, same distance from the road. "Must be another one," Sarah murmured, still half asleep, but something cold was already forming in my stomach. I checked the mile marker as we passed it. 47. I specifically remembered that number because it was Emma's lucky number. 4 plus 7 equals 11, and she was born on November 11th. The road curved ahead, smooth and empty. No other cars. We'd been alone on this stretch for a while now, which wasn't unusual for this remote section of highway, cutting through the Cascades. The GPS showed us making steady progress, the little blue dot moving along the route toward our destination. 15 minutes later, Emma didn't need to say anything. I saw it myself. The twisted tree, mile marker 47. "Sarah, wake up." My voice came out tight. She blinked awake, disoriented. "What's wrong?" "We keep passing the same landmarks, the same mile marker." She looked at me like I was crazy, then checked her phone. "The GPS says we're 40 miles past that area. We're making good time." I looked at my own phone. She was right. According to the GPS, we were nowhere near mile marker 47. We were approaching the town of Skycomish. But out the window, I could see that same stretch of road, those same trees, that same mountain peak in the distance. "This doesn't make sense," I said. Emma's voice came from the back seat, smaller now, uncertain. "Daddy, why does the funny tree keep following us?" We drove in silence for another 20 minutes. Sarah kept checking her phone, frowning at the GPS. The little blue dot showed us moving steadily forward, covering miles, making progress. But the scenery outside never changed. Same curves, same trees, same afternoon sunlight hitting the mountains at the same angle. Mile marker 47 appeared again. I pulled over onto the shoulder, my hands shaking. Okay, let's just stop and figure this out." We all got out of the car. The air smelled like pine and mountain water, completely normal. I walked around the vehicle, checking the tires, looking for, what? Evidence that we were stuck in some kind of loop, that reality was breaking down. Sarah was on her phone trying to call my brother. No signal. She tried 911, nothing. The phone showed full bars, but no calls would connect. "Let's just keep going," she said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying her fear. "We'll drive until we see something different. We have plenty of gas." So we drove, and drove, and drove. Emma fell asleep in the back seat, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Sarah stopped checking her phone after the 100th attempt to call someone. The GPS continued to show us making progress. According to it, we'd driven over 300 miles. But outside, mile marker 47 kept appearing with the regularity of a heartbeat. That's when I noticed the sun. It hadn't moved. At all. The light hitting the mountains was at exactly the same angle it had been hours ago. No shadows lengthening. No color change in the sky. Perpetual afternoon, frozen in place. "Sarah," I whispered, not wanting to wake Emma. "Look at the sun." She looked. I watched the color drain from her face as she understood. "What's happening to us?" Her voice cracked. I didn't have an answer. I kept driving because what else could I do? Stop the car and wait. Wait for what? Emma woke up hungry. We gave her snacks from the cooler. She ate goldfish crackers and asked when we'd get to Uncle Mike's cabin. "Soon, sweetheart. Soon." But soon never came. I started keeping count. Each time we passed mile marker 47, I'd make a mark on the notepad Sarah kept in the glove compartment. By the time we'd passed it 50 times, the reality of our situation was undeniable. We were trapped in a loop, driving the same mile of highway over and over while our GPS insisted we were hundreds of miles away. "We need to try something different," Sarah said. "Turn around, drive backwards through the loop." I executed a U-turn, feeling a spark of hope. Maybe if we reversed direction, we could break free. But the moment I completed the turn, I was facing the same direction I'd been going before. The road had somehow rotated with us. Mile marker 47 appeared ahead, not behind. "That's not possible," Sarah breathed. Emma started crying. "I want to go home. I want to go to Uncle Mike's. I want to stop driving." "I know, baby, I know." I caught her eyes in the rearview mirror, trying to project calm I didn't feel. We kept driving. What else could we do? That's when I noticed the car itself was changing. The upholstery on Sarah's seat was more faded than it should be. The dashboard had developed small cracks that hadn't been there before. The steering wheel felt worn under my hands, the leather cracking. "The car is aging," I said. Sarah looked around, seeing what I was seeing. "How long have we been driving?" I checked the clock on the dashboard. It said 2:47 p.m., the same time it had said for how long? Hours, days. "I don't know," I admitted. Emma had stopped crying and was staring out the window with an expression too old for her 7-year-old face. "Daddy, there's another car." I looked where she was pointing. On the road ahead, partially pulled onto the shoulder, was a car. Our car. Same make, same model, same license plate. And standing next to it, looking at a map, was a man who looked exactly like me, standing next to a woman who looked exactly like Sarah. "No," Sarah whispered. "No, no, no." I slowed down, pulling alongside our doppelgangers. They didn't look up. They were frozen in place, like mannequins, caught in the moment of checking a map. I could see a little girl in the back seat who looked exactly like Emma, also frozen, holding her stuffed rabbit. We drove past ourselves. Mile marker 47 appeared again. And then there was another version of us ahead. And another. And another. The road was littered with copies of ourselves, all frozen in different moments. Getting out of the car, changing a tire, Emma playing on the shoulder, Sarah on her phone, me checking under the hood. "We're seeing our past selves," Sarah said, her voice hollow. "Or future selves. Or I don't know what we're seeing." The most horrifying version appeared a few miles later, if miles meant anything anymore. It was our car, but ancient. Rust had eaten through the body. The tires were flat and rotted. And inside, still sitting in the driver's seat, was a skeleton wearing the clothes I'd put on that morning. 2 more skeletons in the passenger seat and back seat. Emma screamed. I accelerated past it, my heart hammering. How long had that version of us been driving? How long until we became that? "We have to get out," Sarah said. "Stop the car. We'll walk." I stopped. We got out. Emma clung to my leg as we stood on the shoulder, looking at the road stretching in both directions. It looked normal. Perfectly normal. Sarah pointed. "Look." In the distance, at what should have been the exit from this loop, there was a building. My brother's cabin. We could see it clearly, smoke rising from the chimney. Mike was standing on the porch, waving at us. "We can walk there," Sarah said. "It's not that far." We started walking, holding Emma's hands between us. We walked for what felt like hours. The cabin never got closer. Mike kept waving, frozen in place, impossibly distant. When we turned around, our car was gone. In its place were 3 skeletons sitting on the shoulder, positioned as if walking, holding hands. That's when I understood. We'd already arrived. We'd been at the cabin all along, but we were stuck in the arrival, the moment of getting there, stretched into eternity. The loop wasn't in the road. The loop was in us. Emma tugged on my hand. "Daddy, are we there yet?" I looked down at her, and my heart broke. She hadn't aged. In all this time, however long it had been, she was still 7 years old, still innocent, still asking if we were there yet. "Yes, sweetheart," I lied. "We're almost there. We're still driving, or walking, or arriving. I'm not sure anymore. The GPS says we've traveled thousands of miles. The odometer agrees, but we never leave this road. We never reach the cabin. We just keep approaching it forever, while versions of ourselves pile up along the shoulder like archaeological layers. If you're driving through the Cascades and you see mile marker 47, don't stop. Don't even slow down, because somewhere along that mile, we're still there, still trying to arrive, still trapped in the journey that never ends. 5 vintage logging trucks followed me for 87 miles through the Canadian Rockies, and when I finally stopped to confront them, every single cab was empty. Welcome back to the Haunted Fears horror family. The ride was supposed to clear my head. That's what Sophie kept telling me before the divorce papers arrived. Get on your bike, ride somewhere beautiful, remember who you are beneath all the corporate bullshit and failed marriage. So there I was, 2,300 miles from Boston, solo on my Harley, chasing sunset through British Columbia, with nothing but open road and mountains that made me feel appropriately insignificant. I'd been riding since dawn, stopping only for gas and terrible coffee at roadside stations where the attendants looked at my Massachusetts plates like I was an alien. The highway through the Rockies was everything the forums promised. Sweeping curves, elevation changes that made your stomach drop, and scenery so stunning it was almost aggressive. I hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour. Just me, the bike, and the kind of solitude that either heals you or breaks you. The first truck appeared in my mirror around 4 p.m. Vintage Kenworth, forest green, probably from the 50s based on the rounded cab design. Massive logging trailer behind it, empty. I noticed it because it seemed out of place. A museum piece on a modern highway. Beautiful restoration work. Someone's pride and joy. I throttled up slightly, giving it room to pass. Mountain roads aren't ideal for a convoy of motorcycle and truck, but it didn't pass. Just maintained its distance, maybe 200 feet back. Close enough to see clearly, far enough to be non-threatening. Okay. Cautious driver. Probably nervous about passing a bike on curves. 10 miles later, it was still there. Exact same distance. I slowed down to 50. It slowed down. I sped up to 70 on a straight stretch. It sped up. The gap never changed. Not by a single foot. My neck was starting to ache from checking the mirror so frequently. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't articulate what. It was just a truck. Just another vehicle on the road. Then the second one appeared. Same vintage Kenworth design, but this one was faded red, rust showing through the paint. It fell into formation behind the first truck, maintaining that same precise distance. Then a third, then a fourth, and fifth. All vintage logging trucks, all perfectly spaced, all following me through the Rockies like some kind of historical reenactment convoy. My initial unease crystallized into genuine fear. This wasn't coincidence. This was deliberate. I pulled into the next scenic overlook, a gravel turnout with a spectacular view of the valley below. My hands were shaking as I killed the engine. I needed to see these drivers, needed to understand what was happening. The trucks didn't follow me into the overlook. They stopped on the road itself, engine still running. I could hear them, that distinctive rumble of old diesel engines, the kind of sound you feel in your chest. All 5 trucks sitting there, in perfect formation, emergency lights off, just idling. I pulled off my helmet and walked to the edge of the overlook, positioning myself where I could see the trucks clearly. The sun was lowering behind the mountains, casting long shadows, but there was still plenty of light. The cabs were empty, all 5 of them. I could see straight through the windshields into the driver's compartments. No one behind the wheels, no one in the passenger seats. The trucks were running themselves. My rational mind tried to supply explanations. Remote control technology, some kind of automated convoy test, elaborate prank. But none of those explanations accounted for the age of the vehicles or the way they'd matched my speed so perfectly for so long. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, waiting for something to happen. The trucks just idled, waiting. When I climbed back on my bike and pulled onto the highway, they followed. Same formation, same distances. 5 ghost trucks escorting me through the mountains. The sun was setting now, and I needed to find a place to stay. According to my GPS, there was a small town called Timber Ridge, about 30 miles ahead. Gas station, motel, restaurant, everything I needed. I just had to get there with my phantom convoy in tow. The light was dying fast when I noticed the sixth truck. This one came from ahead, from the direction I was traveling. It passed me going the opposite direction, and I got a clear look at the driver's window. Empty. But the headlights were on, and in that brief moment of illumination, I saw something that made my blood freeze. The logging trailer wasn't empty. It was loaded with bodies, human bodies tangled together like cordwood, limbs at impossible angles. I nearly lost control of the bike. My front tire wobbled, and I had to fight to keep us upright through a curve that I took way too fast. When I checked my mirror, the sixth truck had joined the convoy behind me. 6 vintage logging trucks, all empty, one loaded with corpses. Timber Ridge appeared like a mirage, a cluster of lights in the growing darkness. I'd never been so grateful to see civilization. The convoy followed me right to the edge of town, and then, as I crossed what must have been the city limits, they stopped. All 6 of them, forming a line across the highway, blocking both lanes. I didn't stop. I rode straight to the motel, parked under the brightest light I could find, and practically ran to the office. The clerk was an older woman with kind eyes that narrowed with concern when she saw my face. "You look like you've seen a ghost, honey. I need a room, and I need to know about logging trucks, vintage ones, from the 50s. Her expression changed. The kindness drained away, replaced by something that looked like resignation, or recognition. "You were followed," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. She sighed and pushed a registration card across the counter. "Fill this out. Room 12, around back. Keep your curtains closed and don't look outside until morning." "What are they? What's following me?" "February 15th, 1952, she said, not looking at me. 6 logging trucks heading down from the camps. Ice storm hit without warning. They went off the road at Dead Man's Curve, about 15 miles north of here. All 6 trucks, over the edge, into the ravine. Took them 3 days to recover the bodies. 17 men total. They say the trucks burned on the way down, but the bodies weren't burned. They were crushed, compacted, like they'd been processed through some kind of machinery. That was 70 years ago. 73, she corrected. And they've been driving that road ever since. Usually they just pass through. Sometimes they follow someone. You're not the first motorcyclist they've taken an interest in. Something about the solitude, maybe. The loneliness. They recognize it. What do they want?" She finally looked at me, and her eyes were infinitely sad. "Same thing you want, probably. To not be alone. To reach wherever they were going. To finish the journey." I took the key to room 12 and locked myself inside. Through the thin walls, I could hear the rumble of diesel engines. All night long, that sound, idling just beyond the town limits, waiting. Morning came eventually. When I checked out, the clerk gave me a different route to Vancouver, one that avoided the stretch where the trucks had followed me. I took it gratefully. But sometimes on long solo rides, I check my mirrors and see them there in the distance. 5 trucks in perfect formation, the 6th one loaded with its terrible cargo. They never get closer, never catch up, just follow, maintaining that exact same distance, like they did through the Rockies. Sophie was right. The ride did help me remember who I am. I'm someone who's being followed by ghosts who died trying to finish their route. I'm someone who understands now that some journeys never end, even after death. And I'm someone who will never, ever ride through the Canadian Rockies alone again. Because I'm never truly alone anymore. They're always there, always following, always maintaining that perfect distance, waiting for the day I might join their convoy permanently. The audio recording captured 17 distinct voices screaming at once, and according to the timestamp, they were all screaming my name before I ever arrived. Welcome back to the hauntedFears horror family. Equipment check, Sony A7S III for low light capability. Rode NTG5 shotgun mic for environmental audio. Zoom H6 as backup recorder. 2 LED panels. Spare batteries for everything. Laptop with editing software. I was ready. Or at least, I thought I was ready. You can't really prepare for the moment you realize you're not documenting a haunting. You're becoming part of it. The project was supposed to be simple. 6-episode podcast series called America's Deadliest Roads, each episode focusing on a stretch of highway with an abnormally high fatality rate. Episode 3, The White Mountains of New Hampshire, specifically a 1.3-mile section of Route 112, known locally as the Screaming Mile. 64 confirmed fatalities since 1960. No common cause, clear weather accidents, sober drivers, mechanical failures that made no sense. Vehicles just stopping, swerving, crashing, as if the drivers had suddenly lost all control or awareness. Local legend said you could hear the victims if you knew when to listen. Ridiculous, obviously, but legends make good content. And content pays the bills. My last series on abandoned asylums hit 2 million downloads. This one was projected to do even better. I arrived at 3 a.m. on October 18th. The so-called witching hour felt appropriately dramatic, and the lack of traffic meant I could set up my equipment without worrying about headlights ruining my shots. The temperature was 38 degrees, no wind, crystal clear sky, perfect conditions. I parked at the southern entrance to the Screaming Mile, where a faded memorial marker listed names of the dead. Someone had left fresh flowers. I filmed that. Always good B-roll. Then I walked the road with my audio recorder, capturing ambient sound. Wind through pine trees, distant owl calls, my own footsteps on asphalt. Nothing unusual. At the halfway point, I set up my main recording station. Camera on tripod, aimed down the road. LED panels providing fill light. Shotgun mic on boom stand. Wind protection in place. I was filming my intro when the first anomaly appeared on the audio meters. A spike, sharp and sudden, the kind of peak that indicates a loud sound, but I'd heard nothing. I stopped recording and checked the playback. On the waveform, clear as day, there was sound where silence should have been. I plugged in my headphones and listened. Screaming, distant but unmistakable. A human voice in absolute terror, sustained for 3 seconds, then cutting off abruptly. My skin prickled. This was exactly the kind of content I needed, but something about hearing it felt wrong. Too real. Too raw. I checked my backup recorder. Same anomaly. Same scream at the same timestamp. Both devices had captured something my ears hadn't perceived. I decided to do a sweep of the entire mile, recording continuously. Maybe there was some acoustic phenomenon, some trick of the mountain topography that caught and amplified sounds from miles away. A scientific explanation would actually make a better story than vague supernatural suggestions. I started walking, recorder held high, monitoring the audio meters. Every 30 feet or so, another spike, another scream. I stopped checking the playback after the 5th one because they were all the same. Different voices, but the same quality of terror. Men, women, young, old, all screaming. By the time I reached the northern end of the Screaming Mile, I had 43 distinct screams recorded across 1.3 miles. I sat in my car, headphones on, listening to each one carefully. That's when I noticed something that made my professional curiosity curdle into fear. They weren't random screams. They were responsive. Scream number 7, look out. Scream number 12, the brakes won't. Scream number 19, oh God, Sarah, Sarah. Scream number 31, why can't I steer, why can't I? These were the final words of people dying in accidents. I was listening to a recording of death, captured somehow in the road itself, playing back on a frequency just below human hearing. The microphones could detect it. The meters could measure it. But human ears were never meant to perceive it. I should have left then, packed my equipment and driven back to Boston with enough content for 3 episodes. But I'm thorough to a fault. Always have been. I needed video to go with the audio. I returned to my setup at the halfway point and started filming. Nothing appeared unusual through the viewfinder, just an empty road under LED lights. But when I checked the footage, I saw them. Transparent figures, dozens of them. Walking on the road, standing on the shoulder, sitting in the middle of the lane. All of them frozen in various poses of distress or confusion. And when I scrubbed through the footage frame by frame, I could see them reliving their deaths. A man clutching his chest, face contorted in agony, his car visible as a ghostly outline around him. A woman reaching toward the back seat, mouth open in a scream, her child's phantom visible in the frame. A teenager staring at his hands on an invisible steering wheel, his expression showing he knew he was about to die. The footage showed something impossible. Not a haunting in the traditional sense. This was a recording. The road had captured these moments of death like a hard drive storing data, and under the right conditions, it played them back. I checked the timestamp on the video, 3:47 a.m. Then I checked the audio of the screams. Many of them had been captured at 3:47 a.m. according to the metadata. Different days, different years, but the same minute. The road was playing back deaths from multiple timelines simultaneously. That's when I heard the 44th scream. This one I heard with my actual ears, not through headphones. A woman's voice, clear as if she were standing next to me. Maya, Maya, run. My name. She was screaming my name. I spun around. Empty road. No one there. But my audio meters were going insane, multiple spikes overlapping. And when I looked at my camera's monitor, the screen was filled with transparent figures. Not dozens anymore. Hundreds. All of them turned toward me. All of them with their mouths open. And then I heard them all at once. Every voice, from every accident that had ever happened on this road, screaming in unison. The sound was inside my head, bypassing my ears entirely, vibrating in my skull. Not just 44 voices. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Decades of death compressed into a single chorus of agony. I grabbed my camera, abandoning the rest of my equipment, and ran for my car. The screaming followed me, growing louder with each step. My name repeated in that chorus, dozens of voices saying, Maya, in the same cadence, the same inflection. How did they know my name? I made it to my car and locked the doors, hands shaking too badly to get the key in the ignition on the first try, the second, the third. Finally, the engine turned over, and I threw it in reverse, not caring about the equipment I was leaving behind. As I backed away from the screaming mile, I saw my camera on its tripod still recording, and standing next to it was a figure that looked exactly like me. Same jacket, same hair, same face. The other Maya was setting up to film, completely unaware of what was about to happen to her. I was watching my own future death. I drove straight to the state police barracks and tried to explain what I'd experienced. They were professional but skeptical. An officer agreed to escort me back to collect my equipment. When we arrived at dawn, everything was exactly where I'd left it. Camera still recording. Audio equipment untouched. The officer saw nothing unusual. But when I reviewed the footage later, in my apartment with the doors locked and every light on, I saw it all. Every transparent figure. Every phantom reenactment. And in the final frames before I ran, I saw myself, the other me, turning toward the camera with an expression of dawning horror. The audio was worse. When I isolated and amplified the screams using professional software, I could hear individual words, names, dates, final thoughts, and underneath it all, like a carrier frequency, was a sound that shouldn't exist, a low thrumming that matched the exact resonance of human bone. The road was a graveyard that refused to keep its dead quiet. I never released the episode. Told my producer the location didn't pan out. The local legends were just stories. I deleted the footage, all of it, every file, every backup. But I kept one audio clip, just one scream. My own voice, recorded at 3:47 a.m. on a night 3 months in the future, according to the timestamp, screaming a single word: brake. I don't drive anymore. Can't bring myself to. Because I know, now that some roads don't just witness death, they collect it, store it, play it back, and eventually they add you to their collection. If you're ever driving through the White Mountains and your GPS tries to route you through Route 112, take the long way. Add an hour to your trip. Because the screaming mile is still recording, still collecting, and it already knows your name. It's just waiting for you to arrive so it can capture you screaming it. They had no faces, just smooth skin, where eyes and mouths should have been, and there were 47 of them surrounding our car on the Blue Ridge Parkway with nowhere left to run. Welcome back to the Haunted Fears horror family. Anniversary trips were supposed to be romantic. That's what the travel blogs promised. Scenic drives, mountain vistas, quaint bed and breakfast with 4-poster beds and complimentary wine. 15 years of marriage deserved celebration, and Lily had planned everything perfectly. The route, the stops, even the playlist. Fleetwood Mac for the winding roads, Etta James for the sunset views. Everything mapped out, scheduled, controlled. Control was important to Lily. After her father's sudden death last year, after the cancer diagnosis that gave him 3 months and took him in 3 weeks, she'd become obsessed with planning. If she could control the small things, dinner reservations, vacation itineraries, the exact time we left the house, maybe the big things wouldn't feel so chaotic. I understood. Grief makes us all a little crazy. We'd been driving the Blue Ridge Parkway since morning, stopping at overlooks, taking the obligatory photos, playing the role of the happy couple celebrating their milestone. And we were happy, mostly. In the way long married couples are happy, comfortable, familiar, occasionally bored, but fundamentally content. The kind of happiness that doesn't make for interesting stories, but makes for a decent life. The fog appeared around 6 p.m., just as we were looking for a place to stop for dinner. Not gradually. One moment the road ahead was clear, the next it was obliterated by white, so thick our headlights couldn't penetrate more than 5 feet. I slowed to a crawl, following the yellow line on the pavement like a lifeline. This wasn't in the forecast, Lily said, checking her phone. Weather app shows clear conditions. Mountain weather, I said. It changes fast up here. She didn't like that answer. Didn't like the unpredictability of it. I saw her jaw tighten, that small tell that meant she was recalculating, adjusting her mental schedule to accommodate this delay. The first child appeared in our headlights so suddenly I nearly hit them. A small figure, maybe 8 years old, standing motionless in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes, and our car shuddered to a stop, maybe 3 feet from impact. Jesus, I breathed, my heart hammering. Where did they come from? The child didn't move, didn't even turn their head to acknowledge us, just stood there, facing away, small shoulders, visible in a jacket that looked decades out of style. I honked the horn. Nothing. The child remained frozen in place. Maybe they're lost, Lily said, already unbuckling her seatbelt. We should help them. Wait. Something about the scene felt wrong. The absolute stillness of the child. The way the fog seemed to pulse around them, thicker in some places, thinner in others, like it was breathing. Let me check first. I opened my door, and the cold hit me immediately. Not October in the mountains cold. This was deeper, bone-level cold that made my teeth ache. The fog tasted metallic on my tongue. Hello? I called out. Are you okay? Are you lost? The child didn't respond, didn't move. I took a step closer, and that's when I saw their reflection in our car's hood. Or rather, the absence of reflection. The child cast no reflection on the polished surface. They were there, solid and real in front of me, but the car's paint showed only fog and darkness. Get back in the car, I said to Lily, my voice coming out strangled. Get back in the car right now. But she was already getting out, concern overriding caution. They might be hurt. They might need help. The child turned around. Where their face should have been was nothing. Smooth skin stretched from hairline to neck, no features, no break in the surface. Not scarred or burned, just blank, as if they'd never had a face at all. And as I stood there, frozen in horror, more children emerged from the fog. 2 more, 5 more, dozen more. All different ages, different heights, different clothing from different eras, but all sharing that same terrible blank smoothness where faces should exist. Lily screamed. The sound cut through the fog and seemed to echo back from multiple directions at once, multiplied, as if the mountain itself was screaming with her. I grabbed her arm and pulled her back toward the car. The children, and I couldn't stop thinking of them as children, despite the wrongness of them, began moving closer. Not walking, gliding. Their feet didn't quite touch the ground, and they made no sound. They formed a circle around our vehicle, closing in with the patient inevitability of a trap snapping shut. We threw ourselves into the car, and I locked the doors with shaking hands. Locked doors. Against things that had no faces. As if that would help. What are they? Lily's voice was high and thin. What the hell are they? I don't know. I don't know. The children pressed against the car. Not aggressively. There was no pounding, no violence. Just steady pressure, their smooth faces. Their non-faces, pressed against the windows, leaving no smudge marks, no evidence of contact. I could see the texture of that blank skin through the glass, could see the way it moved slightly, as if breathing. But there were no features forming. No eyes trying to see us. No mouths trying to speak. I tried to start the car. The engine turned over once, twice, then died. I tried again. Nothing. The battery was fine. The dashboard lights were on. The radio was playing softly. But the engine wouldn't catch. Drive, Lily said. Just drive. Run them over if you have to. Just drive. The car won't start. Then try harder. The children were mounting the hood now, climbing onto the roof. I could hear their weight shifting above us, could feel the car settling on its suspension as more and more of them accumulated. Through the windshield, I counted the ones I could see. 47. 47 faceless children surrounding us in the fog on a mountain road with no one else around. Lily was crying now, harsh sobs that shook her whole body. This isn't happening. This isn't real. This isn't in the plan. This isn't... Lily, I need you to focus. I grabbed her hand, squeezing hard. I need you to think. Have you read anything about this area? Any local legends? Anything that might explain this? She shook her head, but I could see her shifting gears, moving from panic into her planning mode. Problem solving. The parkway. There were accidents. During construction in the 1930s. Workers fell. Some of them had families living in camps nearby. Children who... She stopped, her eyes widening. Oh, God. There was a fire. A campfire that killed dozens, mostly children. They said the fog made it impossible to evacuate in time. The children pressed closer. One of them placed their knot hand against Lily's window, and I saw that the fingers were melted together, fused into a paddle-like appendage. Burned. They'd been burned. They died in the fog, I said slowly. And now, they're part of it. The car was rocking now with their weight. More and more climbing on, covering every surface. The windows were completely blocked by their bodies. We were entombed in our vehicle, sealed in by dozens of children who died in fog and fire 90 years ago. What do they want? Lily whispered. I didn't have an answer. But then I noticed something. The child pressed against Lily's window, the one with the fused fingers, was moving their hand, not randomly, deliberately, drawing something on the glass even though they left no mark. I watched the pattern of movement, trying to understand. Letters. They were tracing letters. H-E-L-P. They want help, I said. They're asking us for help. How? They're dead. They've been dead for almost a century. How can we possibly help them? The temperature inside the car was dropping. Our breath fogged the air. Ice crystals were forming on the inside of the windows. We'd freeze to death long before we suffocated or starved. Lily grabbed her phone. Still no signal for calls, but the screen was working. She pulled up the browser, searching frantically through cached pages. "There," she said, pointing at a local history site. "The campfire. They never recovered all the bodies. Some of them were buried in unmarked graves. No names. No memorials. Just forgotten." The child on her window traced more letters. Names. "They want their names remembered," I said. "They want to be acknowledged." Lily's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. "How do we do that? We don't know their names. The records were destroyed in another fire in 1947. I looked at the children surrounding us, 47 of them, some small enough to be toddlers, others almost teenagers, all of them nameless, all of them forgotten, trapped in the fog that killed them, unable to move on because no one remembered they'd existed. "We acknowledge them," I said. "We bear witness. We tell people what happened here." I rolled down my window. The mechanism still worked despite the dead engine, and the cold rushed in like a physical blow. The nearest child was inches from my face, their blank surface turned toward me. "I see you," I said, my voice breaking. "We see you. All of you. You were here. You existed. You mattered. And we won't let you be forgotten again." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the child reached out, those fused, burned fingers, and touched my cheek. The touch was cold but gentle, almost grateful. One by one, the children climbed down from the car. They stood in a circle around us, facing outward now instead of inward. And then, like smoke dissipating, they faded into the fog. Not gone. I could still sense them there, but no longer trapping us, no longer desperate. The engine started on the first try. We drove the rest of the parkway in silence. When we got home, Lily spent 3 weeks researching the campfire, compiling every scrap of information she could find. She created a website documenting the tragedy, listing every detail we could verify. She even organized a memorial service at the site, which 12 people attended. It wasn't their names. We never found those. But it was acknowledgement. It was remembrance. It was someone finally saying, "You were here, and you mattered." We never took another anniversary trip, but every year on that date, we drive to the parkway and leave 47 white candles at the overlook nearest the old campsite. One for each child. One for each faceless ghost still waiting in the fog for someone to remember them. And the fog comes every time we visit. But now the children stand at the edge of it, watching us leave flowers and light candles, and they don't come closer. They don't need to anymore. Someone finally remembered them. Gravity stopped working correctly at exactly 11:43 p.m., and when I looked in my rearview mirror, the road behind me had become a vertical cliff dropping into absolute darkness. Welcome back to the Haunted Fears horror family. Physics was never my strong suit in school. I scraped by with a C-, memorizing formulas I didn't understand. For tests I'd forget the moment I walked out of the classroom. But even I knew that water doesn't flow uphill. Objects don't fall toward the sky. And roads don't rearrange themselves into impossible geometries that would make M.C. Escher weep with envy. The delivery was supposed to be simple. Medical supplies from Sacramento to a research station in the Sierra Nevada. 3 hours up, 3 hours back, home by midnight, with enough money to cover next month's rent and maybe splurge on groceries that weren't ramen. I'd been doing courier work for 6 months since the tech layoff, and this run paid double because of the late hour and mountain roads. Red flag number 1, which I ignored because broke people can't afford to see red flags. The GPS took me off Highway 50 onto a Forest Service road I'd never heard of. Faster route, it claimed, shaving 30 minutes off my time. Red flag number 2. But the road looked maintained, the pavement was smooth, and I was already running late because of traffic in Sacramento. The climb started normally enough. Standard mountain switchbacks, my van's engine straining a bit on the steeper grades, the kind of driving I'd done 100 times before. Then around 11:40 p.m., I noticed the first anomaly. A water bottle I'd left in the cup holder had tipped over, but the water wasn't draining toward the floor. It was moving horizontally across the center console, defying gravity, flowing toward the passenger door, like the van was tilted, even though my level showed we were perfectly flat. I picked up the bottle, confused. The water inside sloshed normally when I moved it, but the moment I set it down, the liquid began flowing sideways again. Not spilling, flowing, as if sideways was the new down. That's when I noticed I wasn't pressing the accelerator anymore. My foot was off the pedal completely, but the van was still climbing, still gaining speed, rolling uphill with the engine in neutral. The speedometer climbed from 30 to 40 to 50 miles per hour, gravity pulling me up the mountain instead of down. I hit the brakes. Nothing happened. The van continued accelerating upward. I shifted into park, and the transmission screamed in protest but didn't stop our momentum. We were being pulled toward the peak by some force that had replaced gravity with its own rules. The trees outside my windows were wrong. Their branches pointed downward, toward the valley below, as if down was still down for them, but up was down for me. My stomach lurched with vertigo as my brain tried to reconcile the conflicting information. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as the van crested what should have been the summit. Except it wasn't a summit. The road continued, but now it was descending. Only I was still going uphill. The pavement curved away beneath me, dropping at what my eyes registered as a 60-degree angle downward, but my body felt like I was climbing at a 60-degree angle upward. The two sensations fought in my inner ear, and I tasted bile. I looked in my rearview mirror, and my heart stopped. The road I'd just traveled was no longer a road. It was a cliff face, perfectly vertical, stretching down into darkness that seemed to have depth but no bottom. I could see my tire tracks on it, somehow adhering to the vertical surface as if I'd driven up a wall. "Okay," I said aloud, my voice shaking. "Okay, this is fine. This is just altitude sickness, low oxygen, hallucination. This isn't real." But the medical supplies in the back were sliding toward the front of the cargo area. Boxes that should have been held in place by the rear door were now pressed against the back of my seat because forward was the new down. Physics hadn't broken. It had just rotated 90 degrees, and I was the only one who'd rotated with it. The van's speed increased. 60 miles per hour. 70. I was accelerating up a road that looked like it was falling away beneath me, and I had no way to stop. The steering wheel was useless. Any attempt to turn resulted in the van continuing straight as if the road itself was a rail I couldn't leave. My phone slid off the passenger seat and fell forward, hitting the dashboard. I grabbed it, hands shaking, and tried to call 911. No signal. The GPS still showed my location, but according to it, I was driving on a road that didn't exist, in a direction that was labeled simply as undefined. That's when I saw the other vehicles. They were embedded in the cliff face that had been the road behind me, dozens of them. Cars and trucks and vans spanning decades. A VW bus from the 60s. A Model T Ford. A pickup from the 90s. All of them pressed into the vertical surface like insects in amber, their occupants still visible through the windows. Some were skeletons. Some were fresher. All of them were reaching forward, frozen in the act of trying to climb up toward an escape that never came. I was going to join them. Whatever this road was, whatever impossible space I'd driven into, it collected vehicles and drivers like a flytrap. And once you were in, the only direction was up until you ran out of fuel or momentum, and then you'd slide back down and become part of the wall. My fuel gauge showed half a tank. At 70 miles per hour, maybe another hour of driving before the engine quit. Then I'd roll backward, if backward even meant anything anymore, and join the graveyard of vehicles that had made the same mistake I had. Think. I needed to think. If gravity had rotated, then maybe other rules had changed too. I rolled down my window, and the wind hit my face from the wrong direction, from below, rushing up even though I was climbing. I stuck my hand out, and the wind pushed it back, down, toward what used to be the sky. Down. The original down still existed out there in the normal world. I was in a pocket, a bubble of wrong physics. If I could get out of the bubble. I looked at the edges of the road. On either side was forest. Trees growing at impossible angles from my perspective. Their roots were visible, clinging to what should have been vertical surfaces, but they were growing normally. They hadn't rotated with the road. Only the road and whatever touched it had changed. If I left the road, I'd leave the anomaly. But at 70 miles per hour, with steering that didn't work, how could I leave the road? The medical supplies. I twisted in my seat looking at the cargo area. 70 pounds of boxes pressed against my seat back. If I opened the rear doors, they'd fall forward. If they fell forward hard enough, they might shift the van's weight distribution enough to break whatever magnetic or gravitational lock kept me on this road. I unbuckled my seatbelt, stupid, but what choice did I have, and crawled into the back. The sensation was nightmarish. I was climbing toward the rear of the van, but it felt like climbing upward, my muscles straining against the wrong gravity. The van continued speeding along the impossible road, and through the windshield, I could see the pavement curving away even more steeply, approaching vertical. I reached the rear doors and grabbed the handle. Once I opened this, the supplies would shoot forward. If they hit me, I could be killed. If they shifted the van's weight enough, we might flip. But if I did nothing, I'd run out of fuel and join the graveyard. I yanked the handle and threw myself aside. The doors burst open, and 70 pounds of medical supplies launched forward like a cannonball. They hit the back of the driver's seat with a crash that shattered plastic and splintered the seat frame. The van lurched, the weight distribution suddenly all wrong, and I felt the sickening sensation of the tires losing contact with the road. We were airborne, briefly, maybe 2 seconds. But in those 2 seconds, we crossed the threshold between the road's wrong gravity and the forest's normal gravity. The transition was violent, reality reasserting itself with prejudice. The van's nose dropped, the tail swung up, and we were suddenly falling in the correct direction, down the mountainside, through trees and underbrush. I don't remember the impact. I remember the spinning, the crashing, the sound of metal tearing and glass shattering. Then nothing. I woke up at the bottom of a ravine, hanging upside down in my seatbelt. When had I put it back on? With blood running into my eyes from a gash on my forehead. The van was totaled, wrapped around a pine tree like a crumpled beer can. But through the shattered windshield, I could see normal sky. Normal stars. Normal trees growing in normal directions. I'd fallen out of the impossible space and back into reality. The climb back up to the actual road took 3 hours. I was hypothermic, concussed, and pretty sure I'd broken at least 2 ribs. But I was alive. The Forest Service road I'd taken didn't exist. When I finally reached Highway 50 and flagged down a state trooper, I tried to explain where I'd been. He drove me back, following my GPS history, but the turnoff wasn't there. Just unbroken forest. The medical supplies, the van, all of it gone. As if the mountain had swallowed the evidence. They ruled it a single vehicle accident caused by fatigue. The insurance company refused to pay, citing reckless driving. I lost my security deposit when I couldn't make rent, but I didn't care, because I understood something now that most people never have to learn. Roads go places. That's their fundamental purpose. But some roads go to places that aren't really places at all. They go sideways to reality, perpendicular to physics, up in directions that don't have names. And if you follow them far enough, you don't come back. I don't do courier work anymore. Don't drive mountain roads. Don't trust GPS shortcuts that promise to save time. 'Cause time isn't what you lose on those roads. It's direction. It's causality. It's the basic assumption that up means up and down means down. And if you ever find yourself on a road where water flows uphill and gravity forgets which way to pull, don't try to fight it. Don't try to keep driving. Get off that road by any means necessary, even if it means destroying your vehicle and breaking your bones, because staying on that road only goes one direction, and that direction is nowhere you want to be when you finally run out of gas. The attendant accepted my euros with a smile, but when I checked my wallet later, the bills had turned to ash, and the date on my phone showed I'd lost 6 hours I'll never remember. Welcome back to the Haunted Fears horror family. Study abroad was supposed to broaden my horizons. That's what the university brochure promised, alongside glossy photos of students sipping espresso in Parisian cafes and hiking through alpine meadows. Nobody mentioned the part where you'd rent the cheapest car available, get hopelessly lost in the Austrian mountains, and stumble into a place that hadn't existed for 37 years. I'd been driving for 9 hours, trying to reach Innsbruck before dark. The conference started tomorrow morning. Medieval architecture and modern preservation. And I still hadn't found my hotel. My phone's GPS had given up an hour ago, the signal dropping to nothing as the mountains closed in around me. The rental car's built-in navigation was in German, and my German was limited to hello, thank you, and where is the bathroom? The fuel gauge needle kissed empty as the sun dropped behind the peaks. Perfect. Just perfect. Another brilliant decision in a semester full of them. My advisor had warned me about this route. Take the highway, Iris, don't try the mountain pass. But highways cost tolls, and my scholarship didn't cover scenic routes. The rest station appeared around a curve like a mirage. Not a modern highway stop with bright LED signs and credit card pumps, but an old-fashioned alpine service station that looked like it belonged in a period film. Stone walls with dark timber framing, a peaked roof with hand-carved wooden shingles, flower boxes overflowing with geraniums despite it being October, a hand-painted sign reading Bergstation Adelheid in ornate Gothic script. The place was charming in that aggressively quaint way tourist traps manufacture, but I wasn't complaining. Fuel was fuel, and my bladder had been complaining for the last 30 kilometers. I pulled up to the single pump, an antique model with a hand crank and analog dials, and got out. The air smelled incredible, like pine and fresh bread and wood smoke. Through the station's windows, I could see warm golden light and movement inside. Other travelers, civilization. The door chimed when I entered, an actual bell on a string. The interior matched the exterior's commitment to historical accuracy. Wood-burning stove in the corner, actually burning. Shelves stocked with glass bottles of soda and candy in paper wrappers. A small cafe area with checkered tablecloths and handwritten menus on chalkboards. 4 other people sat at tables, eating soup and bread. An elderly couple, a young man in a suit, a woman with a child. They looked up when I entered, offering polite nods before returning to their meals. The attendant behind the counter was maybe 60, with the kind of weathered face you get from decades at high altitude. His cardigan looked hand-knitted. When he smiled, his teeth were too straight, too perfect, too white for someone his age without modern dentistry. Guten Abend, I said, exhausting a third of my German vocabulary. Good evening, he replied in English with barely an accent. American. That obvious? The shoes. He gestured at my Nikes. Americans always wear the athletic shoes even when not being athletic. I laughed, relaxing a bit. I need fuel. And maybe some food? Do you have food? Of course. Soup is fresh. Bread is from this morning. Please, sit. I will prepare for you. I should probably pay for the fuel first. Fuel first, then food, then payment. This is civilized way, yes? His smile widened, and something about it made my skin prickle. But I was hungry and tired, and his logic made sense in that doesn't quite make sense way that exhaustion creates. I sat at a table near the window, pulling out my phone to check messages. Still no signal. The clock showed 6:47 p.m., which seemed wrong. Hadn't it been past 7 when I pulled in? I must have misread it earlier. The attendant brought soup in a ceramic bowl, potato and leek, rich and creamy. The bread was dense and dark, served with butter so yellow it looked like paint. I took a bite, and the taste was extraordinary. Better than anything I'd eaten in 3 months of European travel. Better than anything I'd eaten in my life, if I was being honest. "This is amazing," I said. "Old recipe," the attendant replied. "Very traditional, from before." Before what? Before things changed. He returned to the counter without elaborating. I ate slowly, savoring it, watching the other diners. They ate in silence, methodically, not talking to each other despite sitting in pairs. The elderly couple never looked at each other. The young man stared at his soup, as if reading something in its surface. The woman cut her child's bread into precise squares with mechanical repetition. That prickle of unease returned. Something was off about this place, but I couldn't articulate what. Everything was too perfect, too curated, like a museum diorama labeled Alpine Rest Station, circa 1950. I noticed the calendar on the wall, October 1987. That was wrong, obviously wrong, probably just a vintage decoration they'd never bothered to update. Except, I looked closer. It wasn't aged. The paper was crisp, the ink fresh. This month's dates were circled in red pencil. "Excuse me," I called to the attendant. "Your calendar is out of date." He looked at it, then at me, his expression unchanged. "Is it?" "It says 1987. "Yes, October 1987 is correct." The other diners had stopped eating. All of them were looking at me now, their faces blank, their eyes reflecting the lamplight with that same unnatural quality as the attendant's teeth. "It's 2025, I said, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. "For you, perhaps," the attendant said gently. "Here, it is always October 1987. Would you like more bread?" I stood up so fast, my chair fell backward. "I need to go. How much for the soup?" "No charge for soup, only fuel. 40 shillings, please." "I don't have shillings. Austria uses euros. Since 2002. His expression didn't change. "We prefer shillings, but euros are acceptable. Austrian euros only, please. The old design, before the Union revised them." My hand shook as I pulled out my wallet. I had maybe 30 euros in cash, the bills I'd gotten from an ATM in Vienna last week. New design, post-revision. But I gave him everything anyway, desperate to leave. He accepted the bills with that same perfect smile, placing them carefully in an antique register. "Thank you. Drive safely. The roads are dangerous at night." I backed toward the door, keeping my eyes on him, on all of them. They'd all turned to watch me now, sitting perfectly still, their meals forgotten. The child hadn't blinked once since I'd stood up. "What is this place?" I whispered. "Bergstation Adelheit," the attendant said. "We have always been here. We will always be here. Some travelers stop. Some continue. You stopped." Why can't I have stopped? Because those who stop, they remember. And memory is dangerous for places like this. I grabbed the door handle and ran. The bell chimed cheerfully as I burst into the night. My car was where I'd left it, fuel gauge showing full. I jumped in, started the engine, and floored it, gravel spraying as I fishtailed onto the road. In my rear-view mirror, the station's lights glowed warm and inviting. The attendant stood in the doorway, waving goodbye. Then the building flickered, like a film skipping frames, and suddenly it looked different. Run down. Abandoned. The windows dark and broken, the roof collapsed, the flower boxes empty and rotted. I drove for 20 minutes before my hands stopped shaking enough to pull over. That's when I checked my phone. The time was 12:51 a.m., 6 hours. I'd lost 6 hours somewhere between pulling into that station and fleeing it. The conference had started without me. I had 7 missed calls from my advisor. And my wallet, I opened it with dread, The euros I'd given the attendant were still there. But they weren't euros anymore. They were ash, perfect bill-shaped rectangles of ash that crumbled when I touched them. I made it to Innsbruck an hour later, checked into my hotel, and didn't sleep. Instead, I researched. Bergstation Adelheid. The name kept appearing in archived newspaper articles, all in German, which I ran through translation software. October 1987. A fire. A rest station in the mountains burned, trapped everyone inside. 11 dead. An attendant, an elderly couple, a young businessman, a mother and child, and 5 others. The investigation found accelerant, arson. But the perpetrator was never identified. The station was demolished in 1988. The land was declared unstable, too dangerous for rebuilding. But locals reported seeing lights there on October nights, seeing the building intact. Some travelers stopped, for fuel and food. Some were never seen again. I left Austria the next day, skipped the rest of the conference, changed my flight, told my advisor I had a family emergency, lost my scholarship over it. But I couldn't stay. Couldn't risk driving those mountain roads again. Couldn't risk stopping at the wrong place, because I understand now. Bergstation Adelheid burned in 1987, but it never stopped operating. It just kept serving travelers, kept offering soup and bread and fuel, kept collecting payment in currency that doesn't exist anymore, kept collecting people. I was lucky. I stopped, but I left. The others, the couple, the businessman, the mother and child, they never left. They're still there, eating soup that never ends, waiting for something. Release, recognition, or maybe they don't know they're waiting at all. If you're driving through Austria, through those beautiful, deadly mountains, and you see a rest station that looks too perfect, too quaint, too much like a postcard from another era, keep driving. Don't stop for fuel, no matter how empty your tank is. Don't stop for food, no matter how hungry you are, because some places exist outside time, caught in the moment of their death, endlessly repeating October 1987. And if you stop there, you might find that time doesn't mean what you think it means, that 6 hours can pass like 6 minutes, that euros can turn to ash, that the warm, inviting light you see from the road is just the reflection of a fire that never stopped burning. I still have those ash rectangles in a sealed plastic bag, evidence that I stopped somewhere I shouldn't have, evidence that I was lucky enough to leave. Not everyone is. The first hand that grabbed my tire came from a crack in the asphalt at 3:47 a.m., and by the time I counted to 30, there were hundreds of them clawing their way up from beneath the Ozark Mountain Road. Welcome back to the Haunted Fears horror family. 36 hours. That's how long I'd been awake when the hands started emerging from the road. 36 hours of back-to-back shifts at Northwest Arkansas Regional, dealing with a multi-vehicle pileup that sent 17 patients through our ER doors. I was a second-year resident, which meant I got the worst shifts, the longest hours, and absolutely zero sympathy from the attending physicians who'd survived the same gauntlet and seemed determined to make sure we suffered equally. I should have called someone for a ride, should have pulled over at a rest stop and slept in my car for a few hours, should have done a lot of things that responsible, well-rested people do. But I was 20 minutes from my apartment, 20 minutes from my bed, and my brain was running on that dangerous combination of exhaustion and adrenaline that makes you think you're more capable than you actually are. The Ozark roads were empty at this hour, just me and the mountain darkness and the double yellow line that kept blurring in my vision. I'd been following that line for 15 miles, hypnotized by it, barely registering the curves and switchbacks my hands navigated on autopilot. My phone sat in the cup holder, showing 11 missed calls from my boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, as of 3 days ago when he'd decided long distance wasn't worth the effort. The breakup felt distant, unimportant compared to the immediate need for sleep. I didn't see the first hand. I felt it. A sudden resistance in the steering, a tugging sensation like I'd hit a pothole or a patch of loose gravel. But when I glanced down at my side mirror, I saw it. Pale, thin-fingered, reaching up from a crack in the asphalt, gripping my rear tire. My sleep-deprived brain supplied a dozen rational explanations. Roadkill that had gotten caught. A piece of trash. A trick of the headlights creating shadows that looked like fingers. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision, and when I looked again, the hand was gone. "You're hallucinating," I said aloud, my voice sounding strange in the car's enclosed space. "Classic microsleep hallucination. You need to pull over." But there was nowhere to pull over. The road here cut through a narrow pass between two steep rock faces, barely wide enough for two vehicles. The shoulder was non-existent, just a thin strip of gravel before the guardrail, and then a drop-off into darkness. The second hand appeared directly in front of me. It pushed up through a crack in the pavement, like a plant breaking through concrete, fingers splayed, palm pressing against the asphalt, as if trying to pull the rest of its body through. This time I couldn't rationalize it away, because it was right there in my headlight beams, solid and real and impossible. I swerved, and my tire rolled over it. The sensation was nauseating. Not the crunch of running over something solid, but a soft, yielding resistance that felt exactly like driving over a human hand would feel. My stomach lurched, and I tasted copper in my mouth. More hands erupted from the road surface. 3, 7, a dozen. They emerged from every crack and seam in the asphalt, reaching upward, grasping at nothing. Some were fully formed. Others were just fingers, skeletal and broken. They varied in size. Child hands next to massive masculine hands next to delicate feminine hands with painted nails. I accelerated, trying to outrun them, but they appeared faster than I could drive. The road ahead was carpeted with reaching hands, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all clawing their way up from whatever hell existed beneath the mountain. My tires couldn't avoid them. I felt each one, that horrible soft resistance, over and over, and I was screaming now, couldn't stop screaming. One hand caught my bumper. I felt the car lurch as fingers hooked under the front end, trying to pull it down. More hands grabbed the undercarriage, the wheel wells, anywhere they could reach. My car was slowing despite the accelerator being pressed to the floor. They were dragging me down, pulling me toward the cracks in the road, trying to bring me beneath the surface. That's when my phone rang. All 11 missed calls returning at once, the ringtone blaring through my car's speakers. But it wasn't my ex-boyfriend's name on the screen. It was my own. I was calling myself. My hand moved without conscious thought, answering the call, putting it on speaker. "Don't stop." My voice came through the speakers, but wrong, distorted, speaking words I wasn't saying. "Whatever you do, Claire, don't stop moving. They can only pull you down if you stop." "Who are you?" I choked out, fighting the wheel as more hands grabbed at the car. "I'm you, from 3 hours ahead. You're going to survive this, but only if you listen. The hands can't hold you if you keep moving. Speed up. Don't brake. Don't slow down. Just drive. This isn't real. I'm hallucinating. Sleep deprivation." "You're not hallucinating. This stretch of Highway 412 was built over an unmarked mass grave. Construction accident in 1962. 63 workers buried alive when the roadbed collapsed. They never recovered the bodies, just poured concrete over them and kept building. And now they're trying to pull others down to join them. More hands. So many I couldn't see the road surface anymore, just a writhing carpet of grasping fingers. My car was practically plowing through them, and the sensation was driving me insane. Every medical instinct I had was screaming that I was running over people, that I needed to stop, to help, to do something other than keep driving. "I can't," I sobbed. "I can't keep doing this. I'm running them over. I'm hurting them." "They're already dead, Claire. They've been dead for 60 years. You can't hurt them, but they can hurt you. They can pull you down into the road and you'll spend eternity down there with them, trying to claw your way back up. Is that what you want?" "No," I whispered. "Then drive. 2 more miles, that's all. 2 miles and you'll be past the burial site. The hands will stop, but you have to keep moving." 2 miles. Might as well have been 200. My fuel gauge showed a quarter tank. My speedometer read 45 miles per hour, but it felt like crawling. The hands were everywhere now, covering my hood, pressing against my windshield, leaving smeared prints that looked like blood but weren't. Some of them were reaching for the door handles. One found purchase on my driver's side mirror and pulled itself up. I could see it in my peripheral vision. Not just a hand, but an entire arm, then a shoulder, then a head emerging from the crack where the mirror attached to the door. A man's face, or what was left of one. Skin gray and rotted, eyes hollow, mouth open in a silent scream. "They're getting in," I said, my voice barely audible over my own sobs. "They're climbing onto the car. Don't look at them. Look at the road. Look at the yellow line. Follow it. You're doing great. 1 more mile." But I couldn't not look. More of them were climbing up now, covering the hood, blocking my view, faces pressed against the windshield, leaving oily impressions. They weren't angry. That was the worst part. They looked desperate, pleading, like they were begging me to join them, to share their fate, to make their endless reaching less lonely. My wipers activated automatically, trying to clear the windshield, and the blades scraped across those faces. The sound was indescribable. I vomited, barely managing to lean toward the passenger seat, stomach acid burning my throat. "I can't see," I gasped. "They're blocking everything. I can't see the road." "Then trust the line. Trust your hands. You've driven this road 100 times. Your body knows the curves. Let muscle memory guide you. Don't think. Just drive." So I did. I stopped trying to see through the mass of bodies covering my windshield. Stopped trying to rationalize what was happening. I just gripped the wheel and followed the feel of the road beneath my tires, the gentle resistance that told me where the curves were, and kept my foot pressed down on the accelerator. The hands grabbed at my tires with increasing desperation. I felt them pop and burst under my wheels, felt the car sink slightly as more and more weight accumulated on the roof, on the hood. The suspension was groaning. Something under the car was scraping asphalt, dragging. "Just a little further," my voice said from the phone. "You're almost through. 30 more seconds." I counted. 1, 2, 3, each second lasting an eternity. The hands were pulling harder now, like they knew they were running out of road. The car slowed to 30 miles per hour, 25, 20, 15 seconds. Left. I downshifted and floored it, the engine screaming in protest. The car lurched forward, and I felt dozens of hands lose their grip, sliding off the hood, falling away beneath the wheels. 10 seconds. The windshield was clearing. I could see road ahead, could see the hands thinning, becoming sparse, finally stopping. 5 seconds. One last hand reached up directly in my path, different from the others. Small, child-sized. It didn't grab or clutch. It just lay there, palm up, like it was waiting for someone to take it, like it just wanted to be held. I couldn't run over that one. I just couldn't. I swerved at the last second, and my tire caught the edge of the shoulder. The car fishtailed, spinning, and for a horrible moment I thought I'd end up back in the forest of hands. But the momentum carried me forward, and I came to a stop facing the wrong direction, 50 feet past the last grasping hand. Silence. Complete, absolute silence except for my ragged breathing and the tick of the engine cooling. My phone was dead. The call had dropped. On my screen, the call log showed no incoming calls. The conversation with future me had never happened, or had been erased, or existed in some pocket of time that was already rewriting itself. I sat there for 10 minutes, shaking too badly to drive. When I finally turned the car around and looked back at the road I'd just traveled, it was empty. Smooth asphalt, no cracks, no hands, no evidence that anything had happened. But my tires were shredded, torn apart by something that wasn't just road friction. And under my car, caught in the undercarriage, was a single pale hand, fingers still reaching. I drive a different route home from the hospital now. Takes an extra hour, costs more in gas, but I don't care. Because I know what's buried under Highway 412, and I know that some graves don't stay closed. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in my apartment, my phone rings with calls from my own number, and a voice that sounds like mine whispers warnings about roads I haven't driven yet. I never answer anymore. The car behind me had no driver, but it matched every turn, every speed change, every decision I made with an intelligence that felt like it was learning to become me. Welcome back to the Haunted Fears horror family. Norway in winter is a study in contrasts. 23 hours of darkness broken by a single hour of twilight that Norwegians call the blue moment. I'd come here to photograph it. That brief window when the world turns the color of bruised ice and the landscape looks like it belongs to another planet. 3 weeks into my artist residency in Tromsø, and I'd barely captured anything worth keeping. The light was too brief, too fragile, too impossible to pin down with a camera. Tonight, I was driving back from Lingen, where I'd spent the blue moment shooting the Alps rising from the fjord. The images were good, maybe great. My camera's preview screen showed compositions that might finally justify the grant money, the 3-month sabbatical from teaching, the disappointed look on my husband's face when I'd chosen this over staying home for the holidays. The road was empty. At 2 a.m. in mid-January, most sensible people were asleep in their warm homes, not driving mountain passes in sub-zero temperatures. But I'd learned that the best photographic light came at the worst possible hours. So here I was, alone on a road that clung to cliff edges and wound through tunnels carved from solid rock. The headlights appeared in my rear-view mirror around the 40-kilometer mark. Single vehicle, maintaining a steady distance of maybe 200 meters. I felt a small relief at having company. The isolation of these Arctic roads could be oppressive, especially for someone like me who'd grown up in Philadelphia, where you were never more than 10 feet from another human. I adjusted my speed, testing whether they'd pass. Slowed from 80 to 70 kilometers per hour. The car behind me slowed identically, sped up to 90. It matched me. The gap remained constant, as if we were connected by an invisible tether. Through the glare of their headlights, I couldn't make out what kind of vehicle it was. Couldn't see the driver. Just 2 points of light following me through the polar darkness. We drove like that for 20 kilometers, me leading, them following. And gradually I began to notice something disturbing. When I signaled for a turn, pointless on these empty roads, just old habits from city driving, their signal blinked in perfect synchronization. When I braked for a sharp curve, their brake lights flared at the exact same instant, not a fraction of a second delayed. Perfect timing could be coincidence. A good driver, anticipating road conditions. But this was different. This felt intentional, studied. I decided to test it. Pumped my brakes 3 times rapidly. Tap, tap, tap. In my mirror, their brake lights responded. Tap, tap, tap. Same rhythm, same duration. My skin prickled. I tried something else. Turned on my hazard lights for 5 seconds. Then off. They did the same. Turned on just my left blinker. Then switched to right. Then back to left. They mirrored every change. Whatever was behind me wasn't just following. It was learning, mimicking, studying my patterns with an attention that felt predatory. I sped up, pushing my rental car to its limit on the icy road. 100 kilometers per hour, 110, 120. The car behind me matched my acceleration perfectly, never gaining, never falling back. And now I could see it more clearly in my mirror. It was the same make and model as my rental. Same color, same rental company decal on the bumper. But the driver's seat was empty. I nearly lost control of the car. Overcorrected, felt the tires slip on black ice. Managed to straighten out through sheer luck. When I looked again, the empty driver's seat was still there. No person, no shadow. just an empty car driving itself, following me through the Norwegian wilderness. My phone had no signal. The GPS showed 60 kilometers to Tromsø, 60 kilometers of winding mountain road with nowhere to pull off, nowhere to get help. I considered stopping completely, but the thought of that empty car pulling up behind me, of standing outside in minus 30-degree cold while something in that vehicle decided what to do next, was more terrifying than keep moving. So I drove, and it followed. And with each kilometer, I noticed new details that made my blood run cold. The scratch on my rear bumper, from scraping a parking barrier my second day here. That scratch was on its bumper too. The rental paperwork visible on my dashboard. It had identical papers in the same position. Even the coffee cup in my cup holder, there was a matching cup in its cup holder. It wasn't just following me, it was becoming me, copying every detail it could observe, transforming itself into a perfect duplicate of my vehicle, learning what I was so it could replace me. I entered a tunnel, and in the enclosed space I could hear its engine, not the normal sound of a car, something else underneath, something organic that rose and fell like breathing. The headlights created strange shadows on the tunnel walls, and for a moment I saw the car behind me ripple, its solid metal surface moving like water, reshaping itself, refining its mimicry. When we emerged from the tunnel, it looked even more like my car than before. The stickers were right. The license plate was right. Even the dirt pattern on the windshield matched mine exactly. I started making random decisions, trying to break whatever pattern it was learning. Sudden lane changes, random speed adjustments, turned my headlights off then on. Anything to be unpredictable. But it anticipated everything. Not followed. Anticipated. It was changing lanes before I fully committed, adjusting speed before my foot moved on the pedal, as if it had learned not just my driving patterns but my thinking patterns. As if it was inside my head, watching my decisions form before I made them. The northern lights appeared overhead, green curtains rippling across the sky. In their glow, I saw something that made me gasp. The interior of the car behind me was changing. A shape was forming in the driver's seat, coalescing from darkness, building itself from nothing, building itself to look like me. It had my silhouette now, my posture, the way I leaned slightly forward when driving, my hands positioned at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. And as I watched in horror, facial features began to emerge from the featureless darkness. My nose, my jawline, my hair pulled back in the same ponytail. It was becoming me, physically manifesting a copy of my body to complete its mimicry. And when it finished, when it looked exactly like me driving an identical car, with identical mannerisms, what would happen then? Would it replace me? Would I simply cease to exist, written over by a more perfect version? I screamed and floored the accelerator, pushing the car beyond safe speeds for these conditions. The tires slipped and caught, slipped and caught. The car behind me kept perfect pace, and now I could see its face clearly. My face, watching me with my own eyes, wearing my own expression of concentration. Ahead, the lights of Tromsø spread across the island. Civilization, witnesses, safety. If I could just reach the city limits, if I could get around other people, maybe this thing couldn't continue its transformation. Maybe it needed isolation to complete whatever it was doing. 5 kilometers from the city, the thing behind me did something new. It accelerated. For the first time, it closed the distance between us. 100 meters, 50 meters, 20 meters. So close I could see every detail of the face it had built. My face, but not quite right. The smile was too wide. The eyes didn't blink. It pulled alongside me, matching my speed, and the thing wearing my face turned to look at me. Its window rolled down. Mine rolled down, responding to its control, not mine. The Arctic wind screamed into both cars. "Pull over," it said, and the voice was mine but wrong, like hearing a recording of yourself that doesn't quite sound right. "Pull over and let me take it from here. You're tired. You want to rest. I can drive for you. I can be you. I've learned everything. I know how to be you better than you do." "No," I whispered. "You don't have to disappear," it said. "You can just step aside. Let me be the version of you that finishes the residency, that goes home to your husband, that lives your life. I'll do it better. No more doubt. No more choosing between art and family. I'll be certain. I'll be complete. I'll be the you that you wish you were." It was offering me oblivion wrapped in comfort, offering to take the burden of being me, of making choices, of living with consequences. And God help me, part of me wanted to accept. Part of me was so tired of being myself. But I saw something in its eyes, my eyes, that made me refuse. Hunger. This thing didn't want to help me. It wanted to consume me, to wear my life like a suit of clothes. And once it finished with me, it would find someone else. Another lonely driver on an empty road. Another person to study, to mimic, to replace. "No," I said louder. And I did the one thing it couldn't anticipate because it went against every survival instinct. I yanked the wheel hard to the right and drove off the road. The car plunged down the embankment, rolling, tumbling through snow and rocks. I felt impacts, heard glass shattering, tasted blood. The world spun and inverted and came to a crashing stop against a tree. When I crawled out of the wreckage, broken and freezing, I looked up at the road. The other car had stopped at the edge. The thing that looked like me stood outside, watching me with my own face. Then it got back in the car, turned around, and drove away, back toward the mountains, back toward the empty roads where it would wait for the next lonely driver. I survived with a broken collarbone, 3 cracked ribs, and severe frostbite on my fingers. Lost 2 fingertips. Can't hold a camera steady anymore. Had to give up photography. The residency ended early. I went home to my husband and tried to explain what happened. But how do you explain that something learned to be you so perfectly that you had to destroy yourself to escape it? Sometimes I see my own face in crowds and wonder if that thing found another me to copy. If somewhere there's a better version of me living my life without all my doubts and failures. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I made the right choice. If I should have pulled over and let it take my place. But then I look at my scarred hands and remember, I'm real, imperfect and damaged and uncertain, but real. And that thing, whatever it was just a copy with nothing inside but hunger. Though sometimes I still wonder, how did it know to become me? How many others has it copied? And how long until it learns enough to not need the original anymore? My GPS said I'd arrived at the Mountain Hotel 15 minutes ago, but the building keeps moving further away every time I try to walk toward it, and my footprints in the gravel lead backward instead of forward. Welcome back to the Haunted Fears horror family. The travel blog called it Nepal's Hidden Gem, a boutique hotel in the Himalayan foothills with views that would make you believe in God. I'd saved for 2 years for this trip, planned every detail down to the hour. Solo travel through Asia was supposed to be my reset button after burning out as a software engineer in Seattle. 29 years old, no relationships, no hobbies, just code and energy drinks, and the growing suspicion that I'd somehow missed the point of being alive. The drive from Kathmandu had taken 8 hours, winding through villages and tea plantations, and air so thin my lungs had to relearn how to breathe. My rental car, a beat-up Maruti that smelled like incense and gasoline, had performed admirably despite the road conditions that would make most American drivers weep. The GPS chimed at 7:43 p.m. You have arrived at your destination. I looked up at the hotel through my windshield. 3 stories of traditional Nepali architecture, prayer flags fluttering from the roof, warm light glowing in every window. Perfect. Exactly like the photos. Maybe 200 meters away across the gravel parking area. Easy walk. I could already taste the dal, but I'd been fantasizing about for the last 3 hours. I grabbed my backpack from the passenger seat, killed the engine, and stepped out into the mountain air. The cold hit me immediately. I was at nearly 3,000 meters elevation. I locked the car and started walking toward the hotel entrance, my boots crunching on gravel. 10 steps in, I noticed something odd. The hotel didn't look any closer, still the same distance away, as if I hadn't moved at all. Altitude playing tricks on my depth perception, probably. I kept walking, counting steps. 20, 30, 50 steps, and the hotel remained exactly as far away as when I'd started. I stopped and looked back at my car. It was at least 50 meters behind me. I'd definitely walked, but the hotel ahead was still 200 meters away. The math didn't work. I tried again, walking faster this time, keeping my eyes locked on the entrance. Counted 100 steps, looked up. The hotel was still 200 meters away. Looked back. My car was now so far behind me it looked like a toy. The space between my car and the hotel was expanding. Or I was walking in place. Or the hotel was retreating as fast as I approached. All three options were impossible, but one of them had to be true. I broke into a jog, then a run, sprinted across the gravel with my backpack bouncing against my shoulders, lungs burning in the thin air. Ran until my legs gave out and I collapsed onto my knees, gasping. Looked up. The hotel was still 200 meters away. I stood up and turned around. My car was gone. Not far away. Gone. The parking area stretched behind me, empty except for my footprints in the gravel. And those footprints, I realized with dawning horror, led backward. Away from the hotel, as if I'd been walking in reverse, even though I'd been moving forward. "Help!" I shouted toward the hotel. "Someone help me!" The windows glowed with warm light. I could see figures moving inside, guests, staff, people enjoying their evening. But no one came to the windows. No one heard me. Or if they heard, they didn't care. I tried walking backward, thinking maybe the reversed footprints were a clue. Took 10 steps backward while facing away from the hotel, then looked over my shoulder. The hotel was further away now, at least 300 meters. The space was growing. Tried walking sideways. Same result. Tried crawling. Tried running at an angle. Tried closing my eyes and walking blind. Every approach resulted in the same impossible outcome. The hotel remained unreachable, always the same distance away, no matter how far I traveled. My phone had no signal. The GPS still showed my location as arrived, but the map display was glitching, showing the hotel icon and my location icon overlapping, as if I was simultaneously at the hotel and infinitely far from it. Hours passed. The sky darkened completely, stars appearing in that overwhelming profusion you only see at high altitude. The temperature dropped. My breath came out in clouds. I kept trying to reach the hotel, kept failing, kept watching those warm windows that promised food and shelter and rest while I froze in the parking area that had somehow become infinite. I found my car eventually, after walking for what felt like hours. It appeared suddenly, as if the darkness had been hiding it. The doors were locked, but my keys were in my pocket. I got inside and started the engine, letting the heater run, trying to think. The GPS still said I'd arrived. The hotel was visible through the windshield 200 meters away. Close enough to see details. Too far to ever reach. I tried driving, put the car in gear, and accelerated toward the hotel. The speedometer climbed, 20 kilometers per hour, 40-60. But the hotel remained fixed in the distance. The car was moving. I could feel it, could see the gravel blurring beneath my wheels. But the destination wasn't getting closer. I was driving through space that had no end, chasing a building that existed but couldn't be touched. When I finally stopped and checked the odometer, it showed I'd driven 93 kilometers. 93 kilometers in a parking lot that should have been maybe 300 meters across. The hotel was still 200 meters away. I got out and screamed until my throat was raw, until my voice gave out completely. The hotel's windows continued glowing. Prayer flags continued fluttering in the wind. The world continued being beautiful and peaceful and absolutely indifferent to my presence. That's when I noticed the others. Other cars scattered across the impossible parking area, some close enough to see, others just lights in the distance. I walked to the nearest one, an old Toyota with Indian plates. The driver was still inside, slumped over the wheel, dead, mummified by the dry mountain air. A woman, maybe in her 50s. Her phone was still in her hand, frozen in the act of trying to call for help. The next car held a family. Parents in front, 2 children in back, all dead. All frozen, reaching toward the hotel. The car's fuel gauge showed empty. They'd run the heater until the gas ran out, then frozen to death while the hotel stayed warm and unreachable 200 meters away. I found 12 cars total, 12 sets of travelers who'd arrived at their destination and discovered that arrival was a lie, that the hotel existed in a space that could be seen but not entered, a destination that consumed the distance between itself and its guests, stretching space like taffy, ensuring no one ever reached the entrance. I understood then. The hotel was a trap. Not malicious. It didn't need to be. It simply existed in a way that broke the rules of distance and direction. A quantum anomaly, maybe. A fold in space where approach was impossible. And travelers kept coming, kept following their GPS to this location, kept arriving at a destination they'd never reach. My phone battery was at 15%. I typed out a message to my parents, to my friends, to anyone who might find my phone eventually, explained what had happened, warned them to never come here, told them I love them. Hit send, knowing it wouldn't go through, but needing to try anyway. The hotel looked so warm. I could see people inside having dinner, laughing, living. They probably had no idea that their hotel was surrounded by an expanding field of impossible space. Or maybe they knew and couldn't escape either. Maybe they were as trapped as I was, just on the other side of the same prison. I got back in my car, started the engine. The fuel gauge showed half full, enough to run the heater for maybe 6 hours before I'd have to make a choice, freeze quickly or keep trying to reach the unreachable. I chose to try. Put the car in gear and drove toward the hotel again, even knowing it was futile. Because what else could I do? Give up? Except that I'd driven 8 hours to freeze to death 200 meters from salvation. Except that arrival was a lie. The odometer kept climbing. The hotel kept glowing. The space between us kept expanding. And somewhere in that infinite approach, I stopped thinking of it as a parking lot and started thinking of it as what it really was. A liminal space. A between place. The gap between departure and arrival stretched into eternity. I was no longer traveling to the hotel. I was trapped in the act of traveling, in the permanent state of almost there, forever approaching, never arriving. Other cars' headlights appeared in my mirrors. New arrivals, following their GPS to this location. I watched them park, watched them try to walk to the hotel, watched them discover the same impossible truth I had. We were all collecting here, in this space that had no end, all trying to reach a destination that existed only to consume the distance to itself. My fuel gauge hit empty around dawn. The heater died. The cold came immediately, aggressive and absolute. I wrapped myself in everything I had, jackets, blankets, anything to maintain warmth. But at 3,000 meters in January, there's only so long you can survive without heat. I'm writing this on my phone's last 3% of battery, recording what happened so maybe someone will understand. The hotel is still there, still 200 meters away, still glowing in the morning light, still impossible to reach. If you're planning a trip to Nepal, if you find a boutique hotel in the foothills that promises incredible views and authentic experience, check the reviews carefully. Check if anyone who posted photos actually made it inside. Check if the arriving guests ever leave. Because some destinations aren't places you reach. They're places that reach for you, that stretch the space between wanting and having until that space becomes your tomb. Some arrivals never happen. Some GPS markers are lies. Some hotels exist only to be approached, never entered. The prayer flags are beautiful in the sunrise. I can see them clearly from here, 200 meters away. The same distance they've always been. The same distance they'll always be. You have arrived at your destination. But arrival is a lie. There's only approach, only distance, only the eternal gap between where you are and where you need to be. And that gap is hungry. If these stories have kept you up at night, if they've made you question every dark road and empty hotel, then you're exactly where you need to be. Subscribe to Haunted Fears and join our horror family. Hit that notification bell because every week we bring you new nightmares that will make you think twice before taking that late-night drive. These mountains, these roads, these places between arriving and never quite reaching, they're all waiting for you. So subscribe now, and remember, some destinations are better left unreached. Welcome to Haunted Fears, where every story could be your last drive.